What if God really is real? Part 2. I'm going to talk more about theological frameworks that explain why God is real. Last video I did more scientific explanations. So this video, I want to go deeper on the theology side of it, more so to have a greater understanding. I understand science. If we look at it, it was like cause and origin. Creation points to a cause. Design points to a designer. Morality points to a moral lawgiver. And then we talked a little bit about desire and longing and how there's nothing in this world that satisfies. So it seems like we're made for something outside of this world. But let's look at this through a theological lens of what if God really is real? I feel like I've had a wrestle with not knowing how to answer this question to people. And I'm like, okay, well, if you're asking me to prove that God is real, I don't know how to tell you besides my own personal experience. So I want to have an answer that's kind of biblically grounded, one that makes sense theologically, scientifically even, but then just to have an answer to explain to people if they're like, okay, well, you need to stand your ground on this because what you're saying isn't real, God's not real, whatever. I just want to be able to defend my faith besides just being like, okay, well, besides the fact that he completely transformed my life, here's how I know that God is real. First thing though that I want to talk about is God makes himself known to us. All of creation points to a creator. We talked about that in the last video. I'll link it, but God reveals himself through creation, through nature, in our conscience. We have morality. He has revealed himself through the way that we see and experience life and beauty. Psalms 19:10, it says, "The heavens declare the glory of the Lord. The skies proclaim the works of his hand." Romans 1:19 through 20, it says that what may be known about God is plain to them because God has made it plain. So God makes himself known to us. He reveals himself to us. Creation reveals a creator. You wouldn't find an iPhone and just think, oh, it just randomly appeared. No, there was a creator. There was a designer behind it. Design points to a greater intelligence. So if you think about the way that the world is designed, there is an intelligence outside of this. Beauty, like mountains, sunsets, galaxies, all of that is a reflection of God's glory. He reveals himself through beauty. Order reveals God's wisdom. Life is chaotic, but think about gravity. That wasn't random. Think about like physics, seasons. Every year, spring, summer, fall, winter, every year they happen. Sunrise, sunset, the waves come, the waves go. There are seasons, there are things that always happen. There is time to plant seeds, and then there is time to harvest. God established that. So the order, biology, physics, all that stuff reveals God's wisdom. And then his provision through rain, through crops, through plants, all of that stuff, it reveals his kindness. Acts 14:17, it says, God providing rain is kindness. So he reveals himself through creation. Creation is revealing something. It's not just random. It has a purpose. We can see God's beauty. We can see his glory. We can see his wisdom through what he revealed. It's not just an accident, but it's truth to who he is. It's true. It's just true. Creation is God's masterpiece. There's a quote, I don't know if it's a quote, but it's said a lot, is that you can tell a lot about an artist by looking at their work. And creation is God's masterpiece. So we can look at creation and then be able to take away from that God is greater than this, that God, the creator of it, is so much bigger, so much better. He's the one that orchestrated the whole thing. So creation reveals God. But then couple theological terms. This one was like kind of under the umbrella of theology proper. It says God is eternal and self-existent. So Exodus 3:14, God says, I am who I am. Psalms 90 verse 2, it says, from everlasting to everlasting, you are God. So these verses, they're not trying to prove who God is. They're telling us who he is. There's the contingency is this word that I learned. And basically it's the idea that everything in the universe depends on something else. But that idea would demand that there would be a non-contingent source. that everything else can rely on. So if contingent, like everything relies on something else, but then there's something that is non-contingent that doesn't rely on other things. So it's kind of the foundation. So that idea itself kind of shows us that or kind of helps prove the point that God isn't part of the created chain. He's not someone that depends on other things. He is the contingent source. He is the source of life. God says through Jesus says, I am life. When he speaks, creation happens. When he speaks, he provided food for for the Israelites in the wilderness. It's his words that created life. He's not contingent on anything else, but everything is contingent on him. It says, from him and through him are all things. He gives us creativity. He gives us wisdom because he is the most creative. He is the most wise. So all of creation reveals God, points back to him, points back to his glory. He is from the beginning. It says, before Moses, I am. That's what he said in the Bible. God has always been and always will be. He's not trying to prove his existence. He's not trying to be like, hey, like, no, look, I need you to believe me. He just is. God is. That's it. It says, I am who I am. Second term would be epistemology. And I think it's just a study of truth. It's that there is a truth. You can know that truth, and truth is objective. I think there's a lot of arguments on this, which I think is so funny that people would even argue this. But atheism would say that our minds are just a product of random evolution. So that means that truth becomes subjective or unreliable. Because if my mind is developing on its own, it was a random accident, then truth is subjective to me. And I think saying that truth is subjective is so lazy. I think that you're kind of a loser if that's what you think, because you're not willing to submit to a truth. You want to be God in your own life. You're saying, oh, it's subjective to me. If I think that it's right, then it's right. And that's not real. That's not reality. There is a moral law that was given to us by a moral lawgiver. We all have that in our conscience. We would all agree that murder is wrong. Someone disagreed. Someone was like, oh, well, I can't morally disagree with the Holocaust because truth is subjective. Like, hello? There's no way in your right mind that you could say that that was a good thing. Or that racism or sexual abuse, there's no way that you could look at those things happening and be like, oh, well, it's subjective. Truth is subjective. It's not. Those are wrong. But when we kind of submit to the idea that like we're just an accident and we're just a random evolution, then we're taking away from the fact that truth is objective. There is a truth. It's knowable. You can know it, and it's objective. God is truth. He's truth telling and he's truth revealing. John 8:32, he says, you will know, Jesus says, you will know the truth, which means you can know it, and then it will set you free. Truth actually brings freedom. And then the Holy Spirit in John, I forget where it is, but it says the Holy Spirit leads you into all truth. So God leads us into truth. There is a truth. It is God. And by his Spirit, he leads us into truth. He leads us into knowing more. So the question, I guess, would be, why would you trust your brain if God isn't real? We are capable of knowing truth because we're made in the image of a creator who is truth. So he put that in us, that we could know him. He designed us to know him. And if he is truth, that means we're designed to know truth. Without God, though, truth becomes subjective, relative, or unknowable. These are things that I'm just learning myself. I'm figuring this out as I go, but the last phrase would be anthropology. It says this is saying we are made for God. In the last video I did on this, part 1, I used a quote by C.S. Lewis, but I thought it was worth bringing back up again in this. It says, if I find in myself desires that nothing in the world can satisfy, the only logical explanation is that I was made for another world. If we evolved by chance, if my ancestors are monkeys or some kind of animal and I came from a caveman, how come there's a craving in us? How come there's a craving in me that money doesn't satisfy? Why is there a craving in me that I want justice? I want to be loved. I'm happily married, but I still feel a longing and a desire for a love that she can't fully satisfy. It's only found in God. I want to see justice, but I'm not seeing it on this side of the kingdom. Why do I want to see morality held up? Like, there's desires in us that are innate, but we don't see it in this world. So then that points to something else. That points to something outside of us. And I think sometimes it's scary to be like, oh, there's something out there. There's something greater. There's a greater power. We don't want that, I think, because we want to be the great power. We don't want to submit to anybody. We want to be the Lord of our lives. And I think that is what separates us from God. Pride is what separated Satan from heaven. That's what sent him out. It was pride. The first sin was pride. God despises a prideful heart. It says he turns away from that. But he loves someone that is humble. Someone that is able to be like, oh, dang, like, maybe I don't have all the answers. Maybe I don't know. And I'm learning this as I go. But I think that if we're so prideful and think that we are in control and that truth is subjective and depends on my own opinions, my own thoughts, my own biases, then it's like, dude, we've lost it. I think we're fully out of our minds if we think that we are in control of anything. There's no way that biology is random. The way that my wife was telling me last night about the way that a woman's body is naturally designed to push out a baby, there is no way that happens randomly. There's no way that DNA stores information like it does and passes down randomly. None of those things point to something random. And then the Holy Spirit revealing truth, the Holy Spirit convicting us when we sin and we're like, oh man, that wasn't right. That points to something bigger, something outside of us. So I want to wrestle with these thoughts of like, okay, well, what is real? Is God really real? The answer to that, I say, is yes. So wrestle with these thoughts. And next week, I'm talking about, in the next video, part 3, I'm going to talk about the clearest revelation of God, which is Jesus. He was God in the flesh. So I'm talking about that. We'll see you next time.